The billionaire was tense as he boarded the private jet with his infant son in his arms. The baby had been crying non-stop for hours, and nothing seemed to soothe him, from the soft lullabies to the most expensive toys money could buy. The child remained inconsolable. Passengers and crew alike cast worried glances at the young man, who was clearly stressed beyond measure. He was a man used to control, used to power, and yet here in this cabin he felt utterly powerless. The jet engines roared to life, and the child's cries grew louder each minute. Felt like an eternity. His personal assistant tried every trick in the book, rocking him, whispering nonsense words from a storybook. But the baby only wailed louder, and his father's patience began to wear thin. The billionaire glanced at the windows. The clouds outside stretched endlessly like his own frustrations. And then she appeared. She was an elderly woman of small stature with deeply lined skin that told the story of a life lived with struggle and perseverance. Her hair was silver and neatly braided. Her eyes shone with a light that seemed to pierce through the tension in the cabin. She had no expensive clothing, no designer accessories, just a simple dress and worn shoes, yet something about her aura made everyone instinctively step back. She moved with quiet dignity, approaching the billionaire cautiously and speaking softly. She said, "May I try something?" He looked at her skeptically. She is just a poor woman, he thought. What could she possibly do that I have not tried? The billionaire was not used to humility or listening to anyone outside his elite circle, yet something about her calm confidence made him pause. The baby was red-faced and screaming, and the man felt desperation like never before. He nodded, gesturing for her to proceed. The woman gently extended her hands and began to hum a low melodic tune. It was not a song. He recognized it was not in any language, but it had rhythm and warmth and an inexplicable power. The child's cries faltered slightly, his tiny fists unclenched, his lips parted, and he blinked as if hearing something soothing for the first time. The billionaire stared in disbelief. The elderly woman continued to hum and softly rocked her own body back and forth, not the baby, just her own body, yet every movement seemed to resonate with the child. She leaned closer and whispered words the billionaire could not understand, yet the baby's eyes grew heavy, and finally he fell into a deep and peaceful sleep. The cabin was silent except for the gentle hum that lingered in the air and the faint sighs of relief from the crew. The billionaire sank into his seat, stunned and grateful. He looked at the woman and asked how she did it. She smiled kindly and said, "Sometimes the world is too much noise, and money cannot buy the things that matter. Sometimes a simple touch, a simple song, a kind soul is all it takes to heal a heart young or old." He swallowed hard, feeling shame, and all in one she did not ask for thanks or payment. She simply patted his hand and returned to her seat. Her presence seemed to fill the entire cabin with warmth and a strange sense of humility. He watched her for the remainder of the flight, marveling at the ease with which she had calmed his son, and how she had reminded him of something he had long forgotten, that wealth could not shield him from the simple truths of life. The flight attendants whispered quietly among themselves about the miracle they had witnessed. A woman with no credentials, no fame, no fortune had achieved what no number of toys or lullabies had managed to do. The billionaire's mind raced. He thought about his own childhood, about the moments of comfort his parents had given him with nothing but presence and love, and he realized he had been missing this element in raising his own son. The elderly woman glanced at him and smiled knowingly. He felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so much time trying to control everything around him that he had forgotten the power of care, the kind that came from someone who had known struggle and had learned patience and compassion through decades of life. He leaned back and for the first time allowed himself to breathe freely. The baby stirred in his sleep and opened his eyes, briefly looking toward the woman and cooing softly, a sound that filled the billionaire's heart with warmth. He was captivated by the realization that this encounter would forever change the way he viewed the world, that perhaps power was not in the bank accounts or in the high-rise towers, but in moments like this, moments of quiet humility and genuine human connection. The woman continued to hum softly, her hands folded in her lap, and the billionaire felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He wanted to speak, wanted to offer her a gift, something commensurate with her efforts, yet she shook her head lightly, refusing all attention. It was enough, she said, simply to see the child at peace, and the man understood finally that there was a lesson here about humility, about kindness, about the invisible threads that bind people together despite social class or wealth. The hours passed swiftly, and soon the plane touched down. The billionaire remained seated for a moment longer, taking in the experience and the presence of the woman who had done the unthinkable. He had seen many things in his life, from extravagant gifts to exotic vacations, from negotiations to boardroom victories, but nothing had moved him like this simple act of care that crossed boundaries of age, class, and expectation. He gently lifted his son, feeling the weight of responsibility not as a financial obligation, but as a moral and emotional one. He vowed silently to be more present, more attentive, more aware of the things that truly mattered. The elderly woman gathered her modest belongings and prepared to disembark. She gave the billionaire a soft nod and whispered words that would stay with him forever. "Remember," he said, "you have taught me more than any mentor could, And she smiled the kind of smile that carries lifetimes of wisdom and the power of quiet impact. He held the baby close, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat matching the hum he had heard moments ago, and felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Stepping off the plane, he watched the woman disappear into the crowd, feeling a sense of awe at how someone so seemingly ordinary could have such an extraordinary effect on a life of privilege. He knew he would carry this story forward for the rest of his life, telling his family, telling friends, telling anyone who would listen about the day a poor elderly woman did the unthinkable and reminded him that love and care are forces stronger than wealth and influence. He looked down at his sleeping child and smiled, understanding that there are miracles in the world that money cannot buy and lessons that only the simplest acts of humanity can teach. And with that realization, he stepped forward into the world anew, carrying with him a sense of humility and gratitude for the woman who had changed everything for him and for his son. And in the days that followed, he found himself reflecting constantly on that flight, on the hum, on the gentle rocking, on the soft whispered words he had not understood but felt in his heart. He realized that being a father was not about buying happiness or shielding from discomfort, but about presence, patience, and the willingness to be vulnerable to the lessons of life that often come from the most unexpected sources. He started visiting her in small ways, sending gifts that were accepted reluctantly, and more importantly, he began to spend quality time with his son, listening to his cries, understanding them, responding with empathy rather than anxiety, and he found joy in the simplicity of those moments. He also began to change the culture of his own world. The employees in his company noticed that he became more patient, more understanding, more willing to listen, and less obsessed with material success. He held meetings differently, treated people differently, and quietly his empire began to shift in tone from cold efficiency to something more humane, more grounded, more human. And he knew it all began with a cry, a baby, a humble elderly woman, and a tune that carried more power than money could ever muster. And from that day forward, whenever he saw someone in need, whenever he heard a cry, whenever he felt frustration, he thought of her, he thought of the unthinkable, and the world seemed a little larger, a little warmer, a little kinder. And in the end, he realized that the greatest wealth he would ever know was not in his accounts, but in the lessons learned from someone who asked for nothing, gave everything, and taught him how to love a child, a family, and the world in ways that money could never touch. And that day on the plane became legend among those who knew the story about the billionaire whose baby cried nonstop until a poor black elderly woman did the unthinkable and changed everything forever.